Hello and welcome to day 70 of 365 days towards racial change. My name is Thomas Nyback and I am so ecstatic to have you still sticking around after 70 days. That's quite a chunk now. We're under the 300 mark now. So let's go. All right. So we're here talking about black issues in America, how we are situated, what we're about. I'm not the spokesperson for black folks. I'm just one tiny sliver of perspective, but I have a burden to see black folks articulate, educated, empowered in this nation that has marginalized us deliberately. It's no accident that we are where we're at, and all this stuff is configured from back 1500s and the advent of slavery, the mass reaping of black souls from Africa, that type. Slavery's been around longer than that, but what has happened in America is slavery on steroids. And over the past 300, 400, 500 years, it prevails, so to speak. So, two veins of thoughts I'm here talking about. First thought is, does the black mind, slave mind, still prevail from generation to generation? I just stumbled onto some interesting videos about childhood development, things like that may bear some support for the answer to that argument. And secondly, does the white mind of privilege, entitlement, get passed down from generation to generation? It's not like a restart from every family unit, but is this, or for black and white, is this a prevailing phenomenon in society? And, are there ways to break it? Is it real? If it is real, can we do something about it and such? Now, the second point I want to make is what a man named Dr. Claude Anderson kind of got me hooked into is, if we can put all things aside about morality of slavery, marginalization, and those very real problems that have come out of such slavery, can we break it down to an economic situation, economic answer? And are blacks getting the same type of treatment, the access of privilege to participate at the table of a white entitlement and privilege? Are we being treated fairly? A lot of things like that. And I'm not advocating a revisit of civil rights and social integration. They have clearly failed in leveling the playing field for blacks. Every time the blacks step up, you're going to find white powerful groups either directly opposing, making it cumbersome, or creating some new committee, some new law, something behind the scenes to hobble black progress. But for blacks on our side, it's going to start with some financial literacy, understanding banking, money, how that works, what's really going on, where's our money going. If we understood, we'll take banks for instance. If we understood how banks were manipulating the system, and how much they take our money, use it in all kinds of strange ways, multiply it and all that, yet they won't give us loans, they won't give us any access. It's hard to get, and they're stingy with it. If we would wake up to some of the things that's going on with the money in America, we could come together collectively and change a lot of that stuff in our favor. But black folks don't come together. We're not united and all that stuff. All those arguments we already know. So we're just walking through these issues. peacefully through. There's no necessary order, timeline, anything like that. Everything is fair game because, you know, one thing I found as I started this project and as I read the material and stuff is that, you know, history, life, it has so many gaps and mysteries and enigmas and whatnot, secrets, you know, but once I started applying slavery, um, black orientation, position in the whole tapestry of America, suddenly everything just smoothed right out. You know, I'll talk. Let me talk just briefly to any amateur astronomers there. I love the stars and the sky. But early on, in the early days of astronomy, the early astronomers had a problem explaining something called retrograde, and real easy. It's as we're looking at, they would call them roaming stars. They didn't really have a grasp of these lights that moved a little faster and more frequently than kind of a backdrop. They didn't understand them as planets initially. But anyway, we'd be moving along, and there'd be a point where it appeared that as we're moving along, the bodies that were moving along with us appeared to move backwards. They call that retrograde. And it's really not retrograde. What it is, it's just picture yourself traveling in a car, and as you pass a vehicle, there's that point where they appear to be moving backwards, which we're not. You're just passing them along the line and stuff like that. So again, they had all kinds of models and stuff, and what happened was they said, well, one bright guy said, well, instead of, we're thinking, we understand these bodies maybe are not stars, got that part down, but they had everything traveling in a perfect circle. And what happened was, one guy said, well, let's just figure this out. Let's try and put these trajectories on the orbit of an ellipse, which is like a little flattened circle, slightly. And boom, everything made sense. These bodies moving and everything all fell into place almost overnight. So that's the same way with history. When I'm running up against resistance and I'm not getting the same privileges and benefits of white members or whiter members of my community, when I take out my brush and start painting in, filling in these mysteries with blackness, slavery, and things like that, oh, everything comes together right nicely. Awareness is half the battle, right? You know, not much has changed, but at least I'm comforted in knowing what's going on. The man that has inspired me, his name's Dr. Claude Anderson. He has a big burden. Oh, for seeing blacks participate correctly at this table of immense wealth that America wields. A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask, are important things to questions in there. So we look into that maybe a couple days, a week or so. We'll get back to one of those questions. We just piecemeal that out. Second book I read of him was Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice. And finally, his national plan to empower Black America, Powernomics. And the material is a little dated, more than a decade old, so it's nothing new. The issues are around slavery and how blacks have just not gotten their just rewards. So what that means is we can jump in anywhere and easily orient ourselves in American space. So we're all over the place. Oh, just so we can have a break, so we can have some fictional account of slavery. Uncle Tom's Cabin. I love this book. As I get into it, I'm almost to the end of it. I understand why it's not required reading or part of the curriculum anymore. It's one of those timeless books. When it came out, it was the second best-selling book in America after the Bible. So you can get an idea of its popularity and how the book influenced theater, race relations, all these things. It was banned in the South. We get blackface from this book, and a lot of interesting things that go on in America. We can find some roots there in Harriet Beecher Stowe's phenomenal work. Look behind me, hashtag us too, hashtag USTOO will give you some idea. This is Black women gathering. They're talking about their issues, being more specific, focusing in. And then there's Black Enough. I always kind of spout these guys up. There's plenty of Black, web pages and sites and Facebooks and stuff like that. Black Enough, BLAGGENUF. Nice place to go. Fellowship, get heard, and or participate in conversations. We are still in our political series. There was a lot of parts to that. We still got a couple days to go. Here, we're on action step number 9, coming out of Dr. Anderson's Powernomics book, A National Plan to Empower Black America. So we're looking at bypassing elected officials and political institutions. I'll do a little introduction of this because politics, there's a lot of rules, loopholes. If you're a registered voter, there's power to at least file or call attention to issues. But there's so many rules, so many tools available. I picture some people being kind of overwhelmed at times by the availability of so many options that they could use to bring attention or get political leaders to be more responsible in their positions. We're not going to go over them specifically. I'll mention some of them. But I only say that to say, politics, I get exasperated. I'm easily put off, I got to admit. I don't want to work very hard just to be heard or get my needs met. I know you got to put some skin in the game and elbow grease at times, but right in school we're taught our vote counts, and it carries all kinds of weight and all this stuff. But then as I get older and you understand the voting machine here in America, and how people tinker with it, mess with it, and all, it's too much. America has too much of stuff, too much. I work at a logistics facility, moving America's stuff, and just the other night I was like, America's just got too much stuff. People just dropping stuff off in America, a lot of Chinese stuff. So all this stuff I'm moving. I mean, granted, I get to have my own space, make videos and stuff. But wow, America, I'm caught up in it too. If I pan my room, you'd see all these Chinese products laying around that I entertain myself with and educate myself with. But voting is the same way. There's just so much voting, and there's so many. There's levels, laws, all these guidelines. I mean, you could probably fill books with just uh, the laws about jaywalking. Like something as simple as crossing the street probably has textbooks and volumes, so that would intimidate me. And with voting, uh, black people being lethargic about anything concerning interacting with America's power structure, it should not be surprising that there's, the blacks are dragging their feet. I mean, we are conditioned as a people, as a race, not to trust, to be at the back of the line, to put our needs after all the others. That's a conditioning from slavery time. We didn't start out in America so empowered, entitled, and all this stuff that we freely look around and see white folks exercising in America. So this voting thing, Dr. Anderson, I think he's reaching here, but we're going to work with him as best we can about this voting thing. So, he says we've been lethargic politically for the past 50 years. Now, that's after, being lethargic previously, having our, we get the right to vote. I don't have the dates of some of the laws. It had to be a law for blacks to vote, which it was really couched in that we couldn't discriminate based on color and some of these other parameters that were enacted. I just don't have the year up in my head. So what we have after the 70s benign neglect law, let's unpack that a little bit. Something benign is harmless. If you're cancer, if the tumor is benign, it's it's probably wrapped in a cyst, and they can go in and cut it out, and they'll follow up with chemo and radiation and whatnot. But if the tumor is malignant, it means it's branching out and it's malignant. It's very icky and gooey and reaching out. That's malignant, and it's going to poison. There's not much surgery can do. They have to do the chemo radiation first. It's malignant because it means it's branching out, right? But if the tumor is benign, it means it's right there. They can cut it out, and they'll follow up with some other treatments. And neglect is obvious. And so what are the 70s benign neglect law? It was, it was saying that it's harmless to neglect black folks. Yeah, they're on the sideline, they're marginalized. Neglecting them is harmless, is kind of what came about from the benign neglect conversation. One of these videos have it. But from that, it gave other groups, whites especially, an excuse to be apathetic towards the black plight, because we had an uproar in the 60s and a lot of activity. Blacks came out the same as they went in with we had, even with terms, civil rights and social integration, we had that, yet we still got nothing, It's like, you ride a Ferris wheel, and they say they want to give you a full meal, but when you get up to the top, it's a big thing. It's a meal, but it's cotton candy, and it looks very big, cotton candy. So when you get down, ain't much has changed. You just went on this big old ride and came down the same as when you got on, when they promised you, a big meal at the top. That's kind of what happened with the 60s civil rights. The blacks didn't get anything. But we just had laws on the books that said that groups couldn't explicitly discriminate and harass us, but it still went on, and black backlashes from from those types of activities bring uptick in lynching and whatnot happens. All right. So some of the voting tools, though, these are only some. I just took a business real estate class this weekend, and there is right. It's a whole new thing about all these real estate terms and stuff, and there's loopholes, and since it's money, they're even more, I'll say, assertive. I want to say aggressive in how they proceed, contracts, legal law, and stuff like that, and to protect them, try to get money and stuff like that. So there's these voters' rights tools I'm going to mention here, but we're going to get more into them after this series. I want to use it as a recap. So some of the things, voter referenda, initiatives, recalls, public hearings, selective withdrawal of patronage. We're going to talk about that just in a moment. Lawsuits, ballot write-ins. And, I've heard of some of this stuff. I see people on CNN say they can use these things, these tools. I don't understand them, how they work. Do I request it while I'm at the ballot box? So, I'm sure I'm not the only black person slow or ignorant of some of these little tools that can be used. So if I had a little community of consistent voters that we were knowledgeable about the issues and stuff, we could collectively use some of these tools. I don't think there'd be much for individuals, but politics is numbers and stuff like that. So if we decide collectively to write something in or pull a referendum, anything, any type of activity, then we start getting some attention. And that's what Dr. Anderson, he's pointing at as something we can do, not just walk up to the voting booth like a zombie and pull levers or drop ballots and whatnot, but actually be engaged. And to be engaged is, understanding our options and how to use those options to get our needs met. Politics is about getting our needs met. It's quid pro quo, something for something. So we're encouraging that politician to come back with something in our favor. We've probably communicated at some point what we wanted. Now it's their job to come through for us. So those are some of the tools. I'm sure I bet you there's volumes and whatnot about it, but that's another thing we should have more of in school. It's so blatant how education keeps a certain segment of the population in the dark and only prepared to be employees on somebody's plantation, even here in the year 2019. And it's so blatant and obvious, like, why parents allow that to go on, and not teach these things in the home. We need to understand money in America, and we need to understand politics. Trust me, white folks, listen, I was at this seminar, business stuff, a lot of father and sons coming through there. White fathers educating their white sons, putting them in position. These little young white men are destined for success. I don't know about their character, but they know how the machine works. They know how to insert themselves and get that privilege. You know, no black father son team out there. Think about that. Oh, so some of these tools, it looks mountainous, arduous, cumbersome, um, you know, and then we have to know how to use them. We don't want to get entangled, you know. Could you imagine being on the battlefield, a caveman on a battlefield where everybody's got projectile weapons, M16s, AKs, whatnot, and you throw this to the wild man, and he's just going to be at the mercy of what's going on in that environment. You know, he's not been trained on that tool. He can't wage any effective offense out there, and he's not going to defend himself well, right? So the lack of this spilling over, the education of this spilling over into the black communities is a big problem. And so, Dr. Anderson, it's a great idea. I think he knows he's reaching here at this point, but he's not, I don't think he's ignorant either. He set the bar way up there, which was good. I just had a recent exercise, got a little assignment from some classes I took, and that they put the bar way up high, So at least I came in at least got 2/3 done instead of nothing. They didn't say go home and try this. No, they gave us a goal, a number, and I tried to reach, couldn't get up there though. But I didn't just come home and go to sleep. I did something. I tried. So he also goes on. He says, why not have the vote be proportional? Take a room of 6 men, 5 white, 1 black. Whose issue is going to prevail, right? But so Dr. Anderson says, why not make some adjustments to help that minority vote? Now, in some ways, America does compensate that way, but not around color lines. But through the Electoral College and the representative system in America, I don't know, I didn't study it for this piece right now, but the idea, you take Rhode Island as a small state, or versus California is many times the size of Rhode Island, but there's structures in place to make Rhode Island vote and representation just as powerful as California. You hear these kind of Horatio's concerns come up in that same idea, like Rhode Island to Michigan, Texas. We've got some big, heavy, large states with some numbers, but there's ways to configure that so that the big states aren't always determining policy for the whole nation, which is a good thing. What the problem is that there should be some mechanisms in place along the black color line, which means, the blacks need to be put in some status to make that a reality. Right now, it's not so. So our whole thing about voting and whatnot is an important conversation if we can first lay the groundwork of making blacks as a group convincingly determinate in making some changes, and rocking the boat. Right now, because of our numbers, and then of the minority of the minority votes, and a lot of that type of thing keeps blacks hobbled and keeps us from being taken seriously in politics. So we want our we need to understand how to use some of these tools to our advantage. We need to take the time, get off our cell phones and stuff. So we're very distracted right now and stuff. So Dr. Anderson's great plan for us to learn the tools of how to bypass some things and hold political leaders accountable. But this step, that's a challenging leap. But we're going to put it out there anyway, just to get our minds going. If we did a little something today, it's 100 times more than we did yesterday if we did nothing, right? There we go. Day 70 out of the way. Thanks for hanging out. I'm Thomas Nyback for 365 Days Towards Racial Change. We'll see you again.